Hi, guys. Welcome to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. This is Vevna Forrow. Yeah, let's get started. Okay, so on the past podcast episode, if you missed it, and I hope everyone's having a good weekend or a great day while you're listening to this. And so I was talking about the CLMP membership the other day, my experience with it, and the benefits overall of joining up with the membership and what it entails, essentially. So if you're curious what CLMP is, listen back to that episode. And towards the very end in my PS note, I mentioned some things and something, that CLMP, another thing that I didn't bring up, keeps us on the loop and, other editors in the community is plagiarism, right? Plagiarism is something that impacts the LitMag community every single year, and not just the LitMag community, around the world in terms of the publication space. There's a lot of that, and it's really unfortunate. I think the question, I guess would be for this episode, how do you handle or catch, plagiarism in the LitMag space, right? Or the LitMag world. So I'll share, my experience. I run a LitMag and a press currently, right? Dippity, if this is the first episode you're listening to. And we haven't run into that a ton per se. However, there are a lot of other journals and litmags out there that have faced it quite heavily. If you go out to even just like a basic Google search or X, or formerly Twitter. I don't use that anymore, but social media in general, most platforms, if you do a couple searches there particularly, I came across quite a few screenshots of names and common names and ones that were popping up in the community that were affecting a lot, these individuals, whoever it is. It could be one person doing this or multiple. It sounds like multiple people, but who knows? Sometimes it's one person and they create a bunch of fake names and bios, and they're taking other poets' published works and trying to pass it off as their own. And that is so messed up and wrong, obviously, and it just makes so much more work for the LitMag or journal. We do the best we can to catch those things, right? And it's hard, so I've seen a lot of LitMags and journals, run in the case where they completely missed it, right? They ended up accepting a poem that was actually someone else's, right? It was plagiarized. And so it's so important to do a plagiarism check. Now, I mentioned this in a couple episodes back in the poetry reader episode, like what's it's like being a poetry reader. So some litmags and journals, they have their reading team do a plagiarism check score on it, or usually the editor-in-chief will do that, So, that's something, if you're going to run a litmag or journal or, or start one up, you should always do a plagiarism check. And there are quite a few different ones out there, tool-wise. I'll just share some of the things that are helpful that, a couple other editors shared with me that I've, incorporated into Dippity too. So, we always do a Google advanced search, even a basic Google search, right? If you copy and paste a couple lines in a Google search, right? And it pops up and, sometimes you find it's been previously published, right? We totally get that quite a bit at Dippity, right? Where poets have submitted work that was previously published, and that's for a call where we're stating you cannot do that. It cannot be previously published. So, so it helps catch things like that, even a basic Google search. But Google Advanced Search, that also is really good. And there are a couple other common plagiarism checkers out there. One, I don't know if I'm mispronouncing it. I don't know. For quite some time, for some reason, I was calling it Qtex. I don't know if it's Ktex or Quatex or Quatex. I don't know, but it's Quetext. So there's a lot of similar ones out there to that. That one particularly, they have like a free cap of checks, but they have like an AI checker and stuff, and different paid plan levels and stuff. But it's a really good tool, very thorough. I really am a fan of it. And there are some other plagiarism checkers out there, obviously. For Q text or K text. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing again. But yeah, usually, you can take a couple lines, right, and copy and paste that in and run it through the plagiarism checker and to see if it pulls any results. It's not necessary always to put the full poem in, but it can be beneficial to do that, obviously. But usually a couple lines, it'll sort of search for a match. Always a good idea to do that, to do a initial plagiarism check before giving any acceptances out. And Grammarly has a plagiarism checker too. That's a free tool. Bunch of other ones out there. And so always do that. And something to note, these plagiarism checkers, right, they're not 100% accurate, right? If someone's, let's say a plagiarist, right, they're submitting a poem that was solely in print, right, that's a lot harder to catch than something that's online that they scooped up. So, yeah, it happens from time to time. And again, it's very, very difficult for lit magazine journals, right? Because then they have to unpublish, or if they ended up publishing, a plagiarized piece and they find out later, right, they have to, unpublish it. And if it's even in print, they have to take that down. They have to update it, right? They have to address that. That is costly to them. And yeah, it wreaks a lot of havoc and a mess. It's messy, right? When others, when individuals do this, and it's messed up. So, there's been reports in the community that, it's been a mix of both paid and free submissions where plagiarists are submitting to, which is really weird, to all kinds of categories and stuff. I don't know. It's just really, really messed up and wrong that others are using multiple fake names and fake bios and cooking up stuff and then just taking others' work and submitting it to lit magazine journals, right? I mean, such a waste of time, and I feel like it's such a horrendous thing, to do. A poet's work, it's very, our work, as writers, it's very important to us, and it holds a lot of meaning, and we invest a great deal of time into it. So for someone else to take our work and to submit it someplace, that is so wrong, and it's very heartbreaking too. And yeah, so plagiarism is something that it's never ever going to go away. There's always going to be individuals out there who do this stuff, right? So you really have to just do the best you can, right? Do the plagiarism checks. I recommend doing not just one plagiarism checker. I try to do a double, right? Two checks, and yeah. So it definitely is beneficial to do that, especially if you're starting a lit mag or journal and you have a reading team. You can have them involved in the plagiarism check process, record the score, or just at least check it, and make sure. So it's so important because there's, nomination events and other things like that. And you don't want some individual who's plagiarizing and submitting fake names, fake information, getting, winning contests and publication awards and all that stuff. It's really, it's just really upsetting, right, when that's discovered and, things like that. So, yeah, I do hope, plagiarism, doesn't increase throughout over the years. I know something that is some lit magazine journals, quite a few, even we, say we don't accept any AI generated work or anything like that. I know some places do, but we don't. And yeah, so there are some tools out there to scan for, AI and things like that. But yeah, anyways, plagiarism and I just wish people would, whoever's doing it, I wish they would take the time to just, create their own poem, create their own, whether it be a short story, create their own original work, right? I mean, it's just so messed up to do that to others' work and to, try to pass it off as your own and to cook up all kinds of fake details and stuff. So, yeah, plagiarism's never going away again. So it's a good measure to always do that. And it's hard to catch everything again. Some plagiarism checkers miss things. It sort of reminds me of back in, was it middle school or high school days we had these assignments, right, where we had to use Turnitin.com. That's the one I was most familiar with growing up, or, back in middle school or my high school days. It could have even been college, I don't remember, but just in school, like Turnitin.com was the one every teacher was using, and it would like scan your paper and essays and historical stuff, our research assignments for any, and we would have to report back our plagiarism score, check to make sure it was clean, and, we had all our references and sources credited and things like that very thoroughly. But yeah, so many plagiarism checkers out there. I just named a couple that, I know some others in the community use. And yeah, so you might find another one that works well for you, and that's totally cool. So many out there. So, those tools exist for a reason, because plagiarism is it's a very, rampant issue. It happens every single year. Again, there's always going to be somebody out there doing that, and it's possible you never come into contact with someone who does that. Either way, it helps also check, for poets submitting previously published work. Like if you're not allowing that for the category, it helps scan those things, because oftentimes we catch poets who do that, or they don't indicate that it was from, let's say a magazine or journal that was defunct or, stopped publishing. So it helps, check things like that, or if they published it in a personal site or somewhere else online, it helps identify those things. So, every lit mag journal has different guidelines around those things and previously published work. So, so just, plagiarism is something I just wanted to talk about briefly. I won't go several hours into the history of plagiarism and, the negative effects of it, because it's quite obvious, right? And so just something to keep in mind. It's something that I see, quite quite a ton of lit magazine journals running into nowadays. It's still happening constantly, with, finding plagiarists and things like that. And, I'll mention, just add this real quick. So in terms of submission management systems, I'm talking about, Submittable, some others on the submission management episode we did a little bit that I did a while back. So, Submittable, we don't really have like a block list or a filtering list to prevent that. We just have to report that in. A lot of submission management systems, you usually just have to report that, any inappropriate account behavior or, spam behavior and things like that, and fraudulent activity and stuff. So, yeah. And Subfolio, again, I don't think there's a flagging or block list or something for certain email addresses and account names. But we just have to report it as you see those things come up. I think DuoSumma, someone may have mentioned the community that has a feature of some kind. But you just have to report that stuff whenever it comes up as soon as possible, and it's important to make others aware in the community, because it helps, oftentimes these individuals who are plagiarizing, they're submitting to multiple lit magazine journals at once. And so it's very bizarre and very heartbreaking and painful, I think, for this to happen to poets' works. I think it also feels like, same thing about like AI, right? I know it's a separate thing, plagiarism and AI a little bit, but AI content scraping, right? It's taking others' work and it's mashing it into another work, right? It's taking bits and pieces of someone's work out there and creating something from it. So it's sort of, that feels messed up to me, Now, I'm not saying AI is, the worst thing in the universe. It's cool. It's cool, right? AI is cool. Like, think about, the back end of that. It's just so amazing that even exists, right? But it's also kind of messed up because, now in the community, I probably could have done a separate AI episode, but I don't feel like it. But yeah, in the community, right, the arts community, the writing community, it's very hard to see that, right? Because AI is essentially feeling like a copycat, a copycat type thing in the world. And it's very, very hard, because like things created by humans, is always a much better, it's good, right? And it's not, it doesn't feel artificial, right? If something's being chewed out from, analyzed others' work, and it's spitting out things from that, it feels, mimicky and very like almost, I think a lot of people in the community and space in general, and the art space, feel that AI is stealing, artists' work and styles and replicating it in a manner that is perhaps, crossing a line. And yeah, I totally get that. And it's, yeah. But yeah, it's, I'm sure, near some of us on this, listening to this episode, or anyone listening, I'm sure you've tinkered with AI just to see what it's about, and things like that, or done some fun, just for fun, to try it out and test it. But yeah, it's tough, so there are some lit mags and journals out there that specify if you do use AI at all, you have to let them know. But yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of AI personally. I'm not saying it's like I'm not saying, we can't get rid of it, right? It's out there. Once something's created, right, there's no way to exterminate AI. It's like everywhere now, so, but yeah, just like plagiarism, right? There's no way to extinguish it from the face of the earth. There's always going to be someone out there doing plagiarism. There's always going to be someone out there doing AI. There's always going to be someone out there doing stuff with, things like that. But yeah, plagiarism, AI, separate things there, individuals plagiarizing. It seems to be just like a wildfire, right now. Like, we're going to put together, I'll share like a list of names to look out for. Now, a majority of our categories are concealed, but I do, check at the end of our rounds, and verify things, as much as possible, bio-wise, plagiarism checking the, scores and things of that nature, and doing a Google search, advanced searches, and, running it through a couple checkers, their poem or short story or the work they submitted. So yeah, to verify things the best I can. So yeah, so it's tough, it's something that it impacts everyone, in the world, right? Outside of the lit mag space again, and community, right? Plagiarism is it happens in schools, and even in workplaces, right? Others stealing others' work, passing off as their own. I think that happens. And yeah, there are, I was gonna list some movies off to watch on the consequences of plagiarism or taking another's work. I think there was there's some, I'm trying to remember the name. What was the name of that movie? Was it, I think it was more on a novel though, not necessarily a poetry book or something. I think it was You'll Meet a Tall Dark Stranger. I think that movie, the dude, he basically takes some other person's work, then he gets a woman, he starts dating her because of his work becoming a success, but it's not his work. I could be wrong, but I think that was a movie I watched that was memorable about plagiarism or stealing another's work and what happened from that. And then there was another one with, what was that other movie with that actor? It was that Limitless actor, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember it. What was it, guys? What was it called? I don't know. I'm trying to remember. Oh, yeah. It was with Bradley Cooper, right? The Words. So, an old manuscript and something, I think he passes the work off as his own to another one. And yeah, so I don't know. I just remember, like, You Will Meet a Tall Dark Stranger, dealt with that a little bit. and The Words. I'm trying to think of any other movies here that deal with that. I don't know. I always tend to talk about movies on podcasts. So, yeah. Yeah. It was so both movies tie, I think, to manuscripts being stolen and the characters passing off as their own. So yeah, check out those movies. You will meet a tall, dark stranger. I think it was, what year was that movie? I think it was 2010. And then The Words was, what year was that movie? Let me look it up really quick. The Words movie, was it 2012? Yeah, so The Words 2012, and You Will Meet a Tall, Dark Stranger from 2010. I think I preferred You Will Meet a Tall, Dark Stranger over The Words. But yeah, both movies tie into the consequences of passing off someone's work as your own and stealing it. I think a lot of people who do that, plagiarism, who aren't caught, they don't really grasp the ramifications or the impact and the ripple effect they do on the community, the writing world, when they do that, until they're caught, or face, consequences for their actions. It is incredibly, gut-wrenching when someone steals your work, even if it happens, let's say on social media or someplace else, or even Substack, it happens, right? Others plagiarizing and stealing others' work and social media. So, yeah. It hurts, when others do that. And, yeah, so I do hope, that, it dies down. I'm seeing spikes in, mentions of this happening again in the lit mag space and community. I'm not going to list off a bunch of names of, plagiarist names and stuff like that, but just know it helps for your readers to make them aware of this. And another benefit, again, of joining the CLMP membership, in the community, you can be aware of this and stay on top of it, to be, keep tabs on certain names that are appearing as plagiarized work, submitting to places, and catch that early on rather than later. So, yeah. I hope this episode helped you. I'm not going to make it super, super long because, again, most of us are aware of what plagiarism is and the impact it has on, on others. So I just wanted to reiterate the importance of always doing a plagiarism check before, doing any acceptances and things like that. As an editor of a lit mag journal or anyone on the editorial team as backups, and things like that. So, however the lit mag journal is structured, some readers might be involved in that. And it's good to implement a step, I like creating a guide for our reading team and myself, and steps, always have like a checklist, to-do list, never forget, So, yeah. I'm sure you'll find a plagiarism checker out there that works for you. You might, want to use more than one. And some places have free caps for the month and stuff, and then you have to upgrade to a paid plan. But there are quite a few free ones, advanced ones out there, so you don't necessarily have to pay. But yeah, it's definitely hard, again, to catch, plagiarism. But, it's totally possible to do that and to prevent it, to minimize any or eliminate, the chance of anyone accepting something that's plagiarized, right? So you want to screen for that, make sure, because definitely can negatively affect the lit mag journal. And yeah, so so I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. I think in the next episode or so we could cover some other things in the lit mag space. And yeah, so I've been thinking about doing some episodes on printing and tools for that in the publication world, and reviews on certain services I've used and stuff. Running a lit mag and journal and press, I've tried a couple different places like print on demand, so we might cover that, and some other questions that I noted down a couple weeks ago. I have to find them, circle back to them, but yeah. So yeah, I hope this helped again, and take care and have awesome days ahead. Yeah. P.S. guys, so I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, to run a few lines through, at least, through Google Advanced Search or online Google Search, Plagiarism Checker, do both. I'd recommend that. In terms of like, just a couple of lines, preferably, running more than that through a search and seeing what it pulls up in results is good, because sometimes there are like chop shop poems out there. Others are taking portions of different previously published poems and putting it into one poem collectively, and that's really messed up too. So that happens. Or others are pulling from various other places collectively and trying to pass it off as their own work. So yeah, it's really tough. A lot of weird stuff happening, all the time in the world. And I think plagiarism is one of those things that's just really, it's again, gut wrenching. And yeah, it happens to others, on social media all the time, theft of work and even over artwork, we see it all the time. And yeah, so, take precautions, always do that final step, before accepting anything as an editor, or if you have, team members, filling in for you, always make sure that's like, have a guide for others on, that. And sometimes the results on plagiarism checkers, you have to, again, look very carefully at what it's pointing to, and things like that, and the originality score. But for the most part, most of the ones out there, there are some fairly, really thorough and good ones out there. I gave a couple examples, but several exist online, And I mentioned through the CLMP membership, right, a lot of editors are willing to exchange information and, knowledge. And yeah, I'm sure, if you ever join that membership, you could reach out and say, hey, what's everyone using, for plagiarism checking nowadays? What's the best one out there, or the recommended one, or a couple of ones to check out. So I just gave some, ones, but there are several others. And sometimes I do use others, right? I totally do. Those are just some go-to ones, So, yeah, I hope this helped again. And yeah, there are, also like some scammers out there, and fake lit mags and journals, right? Pop-up shops, right? And stuff like that, places where you're ghosted from and never hear back from. And yeah, so a lot of scammers, a lot of plagiarists, a lot of it exists in the lit mag world and space for journals and magazines and publications. So it's important to do those checks to, minimize, because down the road, right, that's costly, right, to pull work down, to republish it, to make revisions, to, retract that and pull it down, right? It's costly to do that, right? All of that time invested in, let's say it's a printed issue or even online, right? It takes time to do that and to remove anything, that's caught after the fact, right? So you want to do it ahead of time, catch it, report it, and make others aware in the community. If you're part of the CLMP membership, that's a great way. I see others on social media. I actually came across on social media, I wasn't even looking, but there was a poet account. They were like, hey, this is a plagiarist name, guys, beware and look out. That literally happened last night, and I wasn't even really looking at anything. I was just searching and scrolling through some accounts, reading some poetry, and that actually popped up. It's like, what a coincidence. So I was just talking about this again. So yeah, there are, some common names popping up every year and things like that, patterns. So, you'll come across those on online social media. I think if you do some searching and things like that, especially I saw it on like, again, formerly Twitter X. I don't use that a ton anymore, but, there are posts editors and journals of lit mags have done on plagiarism and plagiarists' names and, things like that. Of course, others change. There's multiple, they have multiple aliases, multiple names, fake names and stuff, fake bios. So it's really tough, a lot of scams are out there again. Individuals who are very good at faking things, right? And making it look real, right? Making it look like it's their own submission, or even like there are some things where there are hoax emails, like others trying to pretend they're, an editor of a lit mag or journal or things like that. Again, you should never have to pay to get published, right? There are very minimal fees, things like that, for most lit mag and journals, to help cover expenses to put towards future publications, but nothing extreme, right? Very minimal fees, right? There's readers' fees, right? Submission contest fees. But there have been, like, I think, hoax emails and others passing off, trying to pretend they're someone they're not, too. So you have to be very, very cautious and take care of that as well. So, yeah, plagiarism, scamming, it exists in the lit mag world. So just wanted to talk about it and tack that on. So now take care, guys, and bye, yeah.